Welcome, guys, to my channel for yet another review of the HBO miniseries Watchmen. Today, I'll be talking about episode 6, entitled This Extraordinary Being. But, as usual, I will not be talking about it by myself. I would like to welcome back to my channel Matt Crandall. Welcome back, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
With all the episodes of Watchmen that we've talked about so far, this is the one that I wanted to get to the most and talk about the most because this is the one that really sends a message to everybody that this show is so much more than just about guys and cops who wear masks. This show is about race. And if you don't think that this show is about race, this show will knock you upside your head and say, look at this and pay attention. We start out with a with Hood of Justice getting interviewed by a bunch of policemen, and these policemen want him to take off his mask. And Hood of Justice says, "Why do you want me to take off my mask?" And they say, "Obviously, because we want to see your face, right?" So, um, so to incentivize Hood of Justice to take off his mask, they say that his quote unquote guy friend has some incriminating photos of him doing some stuff in a safe, right? So eventually, Hood of Justice complies with their request, takes off his mask, and the one racist fat cop takes a picture of him. And right before he clicks the shutter, Hood of Justice basically kicks the ever loving shit out of that cop and the other cop in the room.
Mhm.
So after that sequence happens, we find out that what we're looking at is actually a scene from the TV show within the show of Watchmen, American Hero Story.
It was very dynamic, and certainly as we're settling in, and Hooded Justice is having this talk with the cops, and they're saying, "Take your mask off. We already know who you are. You got to comply." And when Hooded Justice removes the hood, and it's actor Shane Jackson, you know, and then he punches the cops and beats them up. As we come out of that, it's like, okay, we're continuing that TV alternate history about this character that we know was crime fighting around the time of the new Minutemen and all that stuff. And so I thought it was interesting, especially because of where we're going to go in the episode. That is interesting and reminds us Hooded Justice is this mysterious yet intriguing figure that all of these years later, people are still fascinated with, so much so that they have made this very popular TV show about him. It's got a lot of action, and then we realize that we're just watching the TV, and we're back in that moment where Angela has taken the pills and bad stuff's about to go down. So I thought that was really interesting and very dynamic and exciting opening.
You know what I found really frustrating about once we realize that what we're watching is a show within the show, it really pisses me off that as Angela needs medical attention because she is obviously under arrest because of her confession to LG and Lori in the previous episode. But in order for Lori to pump the nostalgia out of her stomach, Lori goes, "You have to sign this. So in order to give me permission to do it, because if you don't, I can't do it." And I'm like, dude, she's obviously going to fucking die. So it's like at that moment, don't you throw away fucking paperwork and try to save the person? But I understand that that's a giant crux into. Yeah, I mean, if Lori didn't do things by the book, we wouldn't have gotten this amazing episode that we're about to get. So, do you have anything just to say about that quick exchange?
Well, I think that's just showing us that they don't, even though they know that they have to do that to maybe save her life, they don't want to open themselves up to some sort of lawsuit by breaking the rules. And it shows that Lori is following the rules of the law to the letter, so much so that she demands that this be signed or they're not going to take action. And she's also at the same time saying, like, I can't believe you've done this. You screwed yourself. And they explain more about what nostalgia is. It's these small microchip like memories. And if the person who takes them is not the person who gave them, whose memory it is, it can be catastrophic. And it was something that was used for people with with certain issues, and then it got out of control and became like this very illegal, weird gray drug that can kill. And she also is saying, where is your grandfather? Where did you get these? Where's your grandfather? How is this adding up as all this is happening? And then I'm intrigued as we start to see Angela slip into the memory, and everything goes black and white, and we're realizing, okay, a majority of this episode is going to be her in her grandfather's shoes at whatever moments he has deemed worthy of putting into these capsules.
I thought that storytelling device was amazing. Like I couldn't believe it when Lori was pressing Angela about signing the paper, but all of a sudden the camera did a slight tilt move to the right, I believe, and then you saw a guy in a police uniform in black and white, while Angela and Lori were still in color. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. And then it just kept going, and I'm like, oh my god, they're not gonna. I'm like, it was amazing, guys. If you are an inspiring writer or a filmmaker and you want to know how to tell a proper story and how to structure a story, this is a great episode to watch, because everything that they do from a story's perspective in this episode is set up perfectly and it's paid off. Even things that they mentioned in previous episodes early in the season are finally explained and paid off. After Angela does a trip into Will's memories, the first thing that she goes through is when Will is being ordained as a police officer. And the very very interesting thing about the scene is that every other cop that's being brought into the police force is white, because this is the 1930s, I believe. And as the police chief is going around pinning badges on these new recruits, when he comes up to Will, or Angela in this instance for this episode, he goes past Will. So I'm like, mother. But then, a few moments later, a black police officer goes over to Will and he congratulates him for becoming a police officer. And Will says thank you and all this. But before he walks away, he moves in real close and he says, be aware of Cyclops. And I'm like, the hell is that?
So we get that really cryptic scene, but again, it just reminds us of the inherent racism of even an institution like the police at the time, because the white sergeant will not pin the badge on the black recruit. They have a special black man who will do it, and it's jarring, and it's showing us that even this organization is got some sort of segregation and rot to it back in the 30s, which of course we've been exploring some of those ideas still. I also was very intrigued because as this starts and we're seeing Will as a young man, Will is played by Jovan Adepo, who has Bad Robot and Lindelof ties. He was on The Leftovers. He's in Watchmen. He was the son of Regina King's family. Then he was in Overlord, which J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot produced. He was the star of that, an underrated, kick-ass, awesome movie that I totally love. And most recently, he was in Babylon. So I love this dude. I think he's great, and he's fantastic in this. So when I saw him, I was like, oh, good. We've got, like, this is not going to be a one scene kind of part. We've got this guy who's really good, and he's going to get the chance to shine over the course of this entire episode. And as this moment happens and we see him and Angela intercut, where there's a part where Angela's standing there in the uniform waiting to get the badge, and then we know that every time we're seeing him, we're also supposed to remember that Angela is actually experiencing these memories as well. So I thought it was a really well done device. This whole scene sets up the corruption even in institutions that are supposed to be doing good right off the bat. And then that cryptic thing about beware the Cyclops is just some sort of mystery that we know we're going to have to crack by the end of this episode, probably, to give us more framing on Will. So I was pleasantly surprised with this great actor who showed up and how they are slowly letting us know so much about this world in such a simple, clean way.
what did you think about the tutorial decision of mixing color and black and white through various scenes of this episode?
It's good. It's a tactic that you can use to call attention to certain things by adding the color back in. We already know that in this universe, Spielberg still used that same trick just in a different movie. And so they are kind of taking a page out of that. Spielberg most famously did it. Lots of people use this tool where you use black and white, and sometimes you have color come in to emphasize something or to have it stand out. So I did like the way that they used that and weaved it throughout.
The next scene that happens is William and June, I believe her name is. They're at dinner, and June is basically trying to convey to William, like, okay, you're a police officer now. They gave you a gun and a stick. What are you going to do with it? Right? And June is just basically trying to understand that June is trying to convey to William that you are one of the angriest men I've ever known. And the cool thing about this, while this is happening, the camera keeps moving around the table. And while Will is trying to say to June, as he's trying to say to her, no, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm just trying to do the right thing. Moments from William's memory when he was younger pop up, and they're the most disturbing memories ever, but they pop up like they're in the scene, but they're not really there. It's a really, really cool device, and it's a really, really cool storytelling device, I thought. So, what do you think about June trying to convince William that he is actually very, very, very angry and he should not be in the position where he is right now?
Well, we're seeing that people in his life know that he's kind of got baggage and he's trying to deal with it in a way that may not be healthy. And so it lets us know a lot about his character. And of course, we know the trauma he has been through with his family in Tulsa when he was a young boy, and how that would entirely shape his outlook on the world and the way that he would view everything. And there would be a lot of anger and rage that probably in that time he doesn't know how to express. So I thought that through the camera work and the writing, the script by Lindelof and Cord Jefferson is so economical in letting us know a lot of stuff with very little dialogue. And the direction by Stephen Williams is not flashy in a distracting way, but a lot of the movement echoes sort of the inner struggle of this character. So I really like the way that all of those elements merge to create something very intriguing, especially because it's a lot to ask us to spend an hour with a character that we have not been that invested in, other than a small flashback when he was young, and then we know him now when he's 105. So for us to go along for the ride, they need to give us something, and they really do, because we start to think like, why would this guy become a cop? Everything we know about him, why would he do that? And so because we have these questions, we want to know the answers by the end of the episode as things move along.
The only thing about this episode that I don't like, and this is a me thing because I'm used to the way that Damon tells stories, and I was conditioned by Lost. So he already taught me to expect stuff like this. I don't like that through various scenes in this episode they keep flashing back to several moments to tell the audience, okay, this is who this guy in the black and white scenes really is. But I'm like, if you've been paying attention, you know who this guy is supposed to be. And I'm like, did did you feel that kind of a decision by Damon and his co-writer uh, to be them not trusting that the audience was going to understand the storytelling that they were trying to go for in this episode?
I think most of it is probably just they included stuff that we kind of already knew, but we need to see Angela absorbing this information so that it fills in the gaps for her. Because if she doesn't have the way back stuff that we have, then she might not be able to actually understand Will as much as we, the audience, do. So I think it was twofold. It's this is week 6, and if you have forgotten stuff from episode 1, we're going to remind you because that was now 6 weeks ago. So you might not be watching this in a binge. You might need a refresher, but also so that when Angela has this information later, we don't say, how did she figure that out? All her memories were only from 1932. And we're finding out, no, she's getting like a lot more information at the same time. We're just not seeing all of it.
That's a great point that I did not consider, because you just like explained it that way, because Angela's the one going through this. So Angela wouldn't know this stuff.
Right.
So it totally makes sense now. You see that? Rewatching stuff and then talking about it with your friends, people, it works. All right. The next scene that we see is Will walking the beat. And he comes across this guy who is trying to burn down a Jewish delicatessen. And he says, stop in the name of the law. That's very, very important. Guy turns around and basically acts so disrespectful, so racist to this cop who's just trying to do the right thing. And Will takes him into the station, right? And, and he tries to book him for burglary and larceny and trying to burn down this Jewish delicatessen. And the officer behind the desk doesn't really want to book him per se. So Will is just trying to is just having a difficult time doing this. And the thing that really pissed me off about this guy, God bless these actors who have to play racist individuals, because I can't imagine how hard that must be. But he calls him a particular name, and I'm like, dude, I hope that at the end of this episode he rams your head through a wall. But what he does is better. But anyway, so a white police officer comes to William's aid, and he says, you know what? Don't worry about it, Will. We'll take care of this, right? So he says to the police officer behind the desk, he goes, we'll take this guy. And he makes an interesting gesture on his forehead. And I'm like, what the hell is this? What is this gesture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Will steps out of the police station. And when Will steps out of the police station, this episode is the one that is directed the best for me as far as visuals, because when Will steps out of the police station, all you see is the door of the police station and then the street. I'm like, that visually, this episode is amazing. So it's just a testament to how they work this out. Mm-hmm. So when Will steps out of the police station, he sees a guy reading a comic book. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's that guy? And I'm like, oh my God, that's Action Comics #1. I'm like, oh my God. So many things about the way that Damon and his co-writer wrote this was like, oh my God, I love you right now. You're just a genius. I love the way that you did that. But a second later, William sees that the guy that he just arrested is out in the street again. And the guy says in a mocking way, hi, police officer. And Will goes back into the station. And then the guy behind the desk says, listen, don't shake the trees, because if you shake the trees, you're gonna find yourself with a bullet in your head.
They show the ineffectual nature of this institution, the police being corrupt, and Will joined them thinking he could make a difference. And it shows that the people in power can do what they want and feel like they are above the law. And in this case, they are, because the law is crooked and certain people will be able to get away with things that they shouldn't be able to. So even though he has joined the police to try and make a difference can't be made because the system is working against you. So it tells us a lot. And as this episode goes on, this scene becomes key because it lets us know why someone like this would think they needed to do something else to shift the power, because their position isn't giving them the opportunity to make a difference. And sometimes you need to maybe go around the law to seek justice.
The next thing that we see Will walking down the street, and then just ever so casually, the same police officers who helped him arrest the racist guy pop up and say, hey, you want to go out for a drink? You want to, you get in the car, we'll take you home, come for a drink, just so we can blow off some steam, basically. And Will go and Will knows that this doesn't look right. A minute later, Will's walking down the uh, Will's walking down a dark alley. Duh, never a good idea, people. And the same cops who just offered to drive him home, go out and take a drink with him, basically show up and beat the shit out of him and put a black hood over his head. And they take him to a large tree and they hang him for a moment. And when they hang him, it's the most uncomfortable, like anxiety inducing moment I've had in quite a while, because the way that the director does it is he does it from inside the mask. So he puts you in Angela's shoes or slash William's shoes. So it's like you're being hanged.
It does show us how, if you are taking someone else's nostalgia, you can be very traumatized and your brain might not recognize that this is not actually real. And maybe that's how some of these people die. So it really puts us in this moment where we're wondering, is Angela going to die by experiencing these horrible memories because they are so vivid and real and awful? And as you said, we knew that the cops were trying to get him out for a drink so that they could put him in a compromising position or do something awful to him. So it doesn't come as a surprise when they quickly do turn and do this. It's a little bit surprising how far they take it, but it just shows that this living day to day in the world that we're presented with here for a person like Will would be a waking nightmare. It would be absolutely awful.
After Will survives being hung, he starts to walk home, and then he sees this two white men assaulting this older couple. And at this point, Will cannot fucking take it anymore. He still has a noose that he was hung with around his neck. He still has the bag, so he takes the bag, puts it over his head, and beats the ever-loving shit out of these two mugger guys. Goes home to June, and he just says one word, which I thought was great. He goes, "I'm angry." It was just so great. It was absolutely fantastic. We go to the next day now, and Will has been sleeping for presumably 24 hours, right? June wakes him up and she says, "Oh, you made the papers, right?" Right? And she reads the paper, right? And the paper just basically says, older couple saved by guy in hood. And the older couple says, if this guy in the hood didn't come and show up, we would probably be dead, right? So June says something very, very interesting. She goes, why don't you tell me about that film that you watched when you were a kid? What was that police sheriff like? And what did he say in the video and all that stuff? And I was like, this is great storytelling. Because every piece that Damon and his other writers set up, they're paying off right now in a satisfying way. And the most exciting thing about it was while they were telling that story, they were intercutting images of Will being put in the basket, and I'm like, oh, you were doubling down on Superman. So Damon and his other writers are saying, Will views himself as like a savior. He views himself like Clark Kent in this example, among other things. So I thought that was just a really, really interesting story technique. And I loved what Damon was saying here outwardly and with the subtext.
We are reminded of when we first met Will as he was watching this movie that he had seen countless times. And then the horrible Tulsa massacre happens. And in that moment where he has had this traumatic event now, and then he uses that to become this new figure who can deal justice in a way that he can't when he's wearing the police uniform. And we immediately know, oh, this is the birth of hooded justice, not this guy, this white guy in a police station popping quips and punching cops. It's actually Will. This is his origin story as this masked vigilante that now obviously his story has been erased and we're seeing the actual formation of him as this hooded justice figure. And we know that, however many years after in the future, people still don't know that that was him, but we know, it's actually him. So I thought that was really interesting.
For all intents and purposes, Will inspired the Minutemen, which we'll get to in a second, but he also inspired the Watchmen. So he was the spark of the whole damn thing.
Mhm.
which I find fascinating. So the next thing that happens is that Will is basically home. He's having dinner with June, and this guy shows up. And he tells him about that he believes that Hood of Justice has a cop on the inside, and he would like Hood of Justice to get him a message, right? And the way that this guy is talking, he's very, very odd and it's very tongue in cheek, like, oh, I'm just doing this as a formal thing. I know exactly who you are, and I want you to join our team. And the team that he's talking about for Will to basically join is the Minutemen, which I just said the Minutemen eventually become the Watchmen. Are you seeing all the threads here, people? It's excellent. I love this episode so much. The thing that I find so interesting is that Will obviously doesn't want to be going through this, but when Will puts on the mask, he feels better, and he finds a way to get rid of the rage. So it's really interesting to me that he couldn't quit doing this. That he just had to find out what was happening here, and that through all of June's conniving and her suggestions, he really didn't listen to June at all. He did what he wanted to do because he almost felt a responsibility and a need to do it. And the reason why he felt like that was because of the film that he saw when he was a kid, which was coincidentally right before Giant Massacre, which basically framed his entire life and made him the vicious individual that he is. What do you think of all that storytelling, finagling that Damon and his co-writer did for this episode?
Well, it's great, and that coupled with the scene that comes right after it really tells us a lot. And so
Yeah.
when this character shows up looking like an Aryan Superman, saying, he's this blonde white dude, and he's like, I know that Hooded Justice has someone on the inside who I think that might be you, and he's kind of like, yeah, doing a little bit of a wink, wink, nod, nod. I know that you are putting on this disguise and going out and doing these things. It's interesting because, yeah, we're seeing how Will and Hooded Justice fit into this new Minutemen ideal and how this could be something that then becomes the Watchmen. And that's very fascinating. But also knowing, I will give a shout out that, the actor is Jake McDorman, who just starred on Damon Lindelof's Mrs. Davis. So it's great to see him. He will always be Evan from Greek, ABC Family's great teen show to me. But so I was happy to see him. But then shortly after that, we see him and Will in bed together. And so we're actually finding out that part of what Will's wife has been saying is, you have demons that you've been trying to escape. And we know that they're actually more than just this trauma and rage. He wears a mask every single day because obviously there's more going on here. He is a homosexual, or at least bisexual. So there is something that he has always tried to hide and tamp down. And when he puts on the hood, yes, the anger comes out, but it's like the first time that he's not hiding. So I think there's a lot in those scenes that tell us so much, you know, in the 1930s that we see. Obviously, it's very difficult for him to be even just existing as a black man, but to then add this other thing on top of it would make it even more unmanageable in the social ideals of the time. And so when we see him and Captain Metropolis together in bed, it tells us, oh, okay, there's a lot going on with this character. It's not just he's angry about racism. It's his whole life has to be wearing a mask every day. Even when he actually puts on the mask is when he almost finally feels free.
Again, that to me that just shows how extremely well thought out this episode was, and this episode was crafted expertly by Damon and his writers.
Yeah.
It was just great. Those writers deserve all the awards in the book for writing this entire miniseries, in my estimation. Will shows up as Hood of Justice to one of the Minutemen meetings, and basically he tries to sell to the media that he believes that there's a vast conspiracy going on in New York City, right? And he's trying to bring attention to this. And all of a sudden, Captain Metropolis wants to pivot the conversation to something more dastardly and something more, uh, this sounds stupid saying, but PC friendly for the time. And then he starts talking about the Minutemen sponsorship with a bank. And this is what I thought was genius. So he walks over to an easel nearby, pulls the easel down, and the photo that they picked out was the same photo that was in the Seventh Cavalry house when Angela and the police force raided it years later, decades later. So I was like, that's a nice that's yet another drop of the cap and pick up that I thought was just great. But the thing that I liked about this scene so much is that this scene showed that this group of Minutemen was more concerned about being weekend superheroes, that they weren't really concerned about really fighting justice. They wanted to play pretend and they weren't really serious about being superheroes and making a change.
Absolutely, they're corporate sellouts. Any superhero team that's got a corporate sponsor is not going to dole out justice and actually follow through on what they're trying to preach. So Will realizes this is kind of a hollow gesture. It's putting a pretty face on an ugly thing, and when he tries to actually delve deep into that ugly thing, they pump the brakes. So he's realizing the reason he put on a hood is to make an actual change, and by being part of this team, that's not actually going to really be possible in the way that he thought initially. We also, a key thing that we find out, and the reason why Hooded Justice is played by not a man of color in the reenactment, is that he puts makeup on to disguise his race, to try and keep some anonymity, but also if you're going to have people rally around a mass vigilante, he knows that if they knew it was a black man, it would make it even more complicated. And so I thought that was very interesting. And that becomes kind of like a key thing that is revisited later, the makeup that he puts on as part of his disguise before he goes out. But the sadness when he realizes that the new Minutemen are the same as the cops. It's performative. It's not real. They've got a corporate sponsor. They're not going to be able to actually make the difference that he wants to make.
Like you just said, it's just, it's sad and terrifying that these individuals want to be corporate shills and they don't really care about doing justice. But to me, what happens in just a few scenes here is even more heartbreaking and just it's really frustrating to me. So Will gets called to a massacre at a theater where people of color were watching a movie, and all of a sudden, a bright pulsating light comes on the screen, and these people of color started beating the crap out of each other. After William goes to investigate that thing, he speaks to a lady who tells him about the pulsating light, and all this happens. He goes to a phone booth. Will tries to speak out to He tries to speak to Captain Metropolis and say, "Listen, I found out where this people is, and I need your guys' help. I need you guys to be here right now and show up." And this douche says, "Oh, we're not really concerned about violence having to do with people of color." And I'm like, "You son of a!" Oh, I just felt so destroyed and so bad for Will in that moment. Right after he had that heartbreaking conversation with Captain Metropolis, the guy who bangs on the glass of the phone booth, obviously wanting to get in, is the same fat racist bastard that tried to burn down the delicatessen. So I'm like, you better watch what you say right now, because if you don't, he's gonna. And as you guessed it, guys, actually, so this fat guy, before he meets his end, says that he's going to take Will to a meat house to get a cut of meat. And so he basically doles out that information. And this is the point where Will snaps and he shoots him in the head. And this is the point where Will says, "Fuck it. If nobody's going to help me, I'm going to do it myself."
Yeah, well, it's great. So we find out they lay on the movie
Yeah.
theater stuff. We find out, okay, what the Cyclops' plan is is this out there plan where they use like hypnotism to turn black people against black people and to make them attack each other and do these horrible things. So we're really going out on a limb here with, all right, this is some sort of hypnotism plot, which you in this universe I can buy, but in real life, if this happened in like a grounded movie, you'd be like, what? But so that's interesting. The phone call is heartbreaking because he realizes that this team that he has signed up for is performative. It's garbage. And to add insult to injury, on the phone call, the guy says, yeah, we're not going to come and help. We don't care about people of color, but if you want to come by for a booty call, I'm more than happy to treat you like a sex toy. And so it's like, okay, he knows when he hangs up the phone, like he's even more angry because this was just some sort of fling and all of it was meaningless. And then he sees the guy that he tried to arrest, and that guy skated out, and the guy says, do I recognize you? He's like, let me hook you up. Let's go to my meat thing and I'll get you some nice steaks, because that's how I buy off the cops. I give them things and they just let me do what I want to do. But of course, we know that all of this has been building, and this guy is emblematic of everything wrong with the system. He is a guy who can get away with anything because of his privilege and station. He is anti-Semitic. He's racist. He's everything we hate. And then, as we know, Will is on the very verge of losing it. This guy offhandedly throws out a racist remark, and it's like one step too far, and Will kills him. And we're like, yes, hell yeah, way to go. And now we know he's going to have to go and investigate what's going on here and hopefully get more information about this plot to release this, hypnotism movie that's going to cause terrible things, presumably countrywide. So I thought the way that they handle it and bringing back that character that we already had connection to from earlier in the episode as just a piece of garbage was very effective. And we are in Will's headspace, knowing his anger, frustration, and we see it all come to a boil. And this is the moment where the pot just explodes.
I'm not going to go section by section because this is a really, really long scene of Will just laying waste to a bunch of anti-Semitic, racist assholes. But basically, Will goes to the meat factory, and in the meat factory is the headquarters of Cyclops, and he lays waste to everyone. Right after he lays waste to everyone, he goes into a back room that has a bulb, a red light on it, and that's basically the recording room. So Will steps in, and he sees this guy making this video where he says, kill every black person you see, don't harm any white people. It's just really, really racist things, right? And I love the way that the director framed the shot, because when Will enters the room, all you see is the guy making the tape, and the guy has on headphones, so he has no idea that a massacre happened in the next room. And Will slowly walks up to him, and he goes to shoot him, and he runs out of bullets. So I'm like, oh, what the hell is he gonna do now? So he takes the headphone wires off the guy and basically strangles him to death. I'm like, yes, it's just so sweet. He basically takes a bunch of gases the whole place, takes the racist asshole from outside, puts him in the storage room, puts him in the meat packing place, torches the whole place. And one of my favorite shots is just him standing outside of the meat factory watching the whole thing burn. It's just such a great shot.
Obviously he cleans house, and we see this film that they are working on that's got the racist subliminal messages that they're going to play. And because we see the guy recording the voiceover, it's explicit that, yes, this is what it is. This is their plan. And for him to them kill this guy and then literally burn it all down. This is what he's been trying to do the whole time. With the systemic problems, just torch it and start again. Now, we know this doesn't solve anything, because in the future, we still have a lot of these same problems, but it's interesting to see the way that Will goes about this and does get some good progress made, but it's like swimming upstream, and it's not going to fix everything, but it's satisfying. And we still at this point are wondering, what happens after this that Angela never knew about Will. So like we still have to have that answered, and in the next scene or two we finally get a few answers as to why that is. So I thought the way that they set all this up, and certainly the imagery of a lone man standing in front of a burning warehouse trying to make a difference, is very powerful.
I really think racism in general is just like trying to fight the war on drugs, right? You can spend your entire life fighting the war on drugs, but here's the thing: you can kill you can take 100 drug lords off the street tomorrow, but the problem is the drug selling business and racism are like plants in a forest, right? You burn down 100 today, tomorrow, 100 new ones will be sprout up to take its place, right?
Right.
So racism to me is the unwinnable conundrum, because unfortunately the human condition will always not like things that don't look like them or don't talk like them, unfortunately. So I just think that's I think that's a inherent problem that being a human brings if you're not raised correctly and if you're raised in the wrong part of the world. What happens next is Will goes home and he sees his son playing with the makeup that he puts on his eyelids to make people uh, who get saved by the hood of justice think that he's white. He sees his kid playing with the makeup, right? And he freaks out and he says, no, 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 no. He wipes the makeup off his face. And that's when June just loses it. And she goes, this is absolute bullshit. You need this. I thought that this madness and this hate was going to be gone from your system, but I've had enough. I'm taking my son out of here and I'm going back to Tulsa. Right? So the next thing that we see is William sitting there. And the director or the editor of this episode, both of them do something really, really great. As Will's sitting there, we see flashes of old Will and new Will. And during one of the old flashes, June says, I want you to stay away from us, and I don't want you to ever come and find us ever again. So that's why that's why Angela doesn't know who the hell Will is, because of what June said. Very, very economical storytelling. Also, something very interesting that's going to get paid off later. We see that June is Angela's grandmother or great grandmother. That will get paid off later. Everything in this everything from a writing standpoint, from a directing standpoint in this episode is so economical, so perfect, and everything lines up. It just works. I love it when shit works. We go back to the pilot, right? When Jed is walking, when Jed is driving down the road, he's not walking down the road, idiot. When Jed is driving down the road and his tires get blown out by a spike in the road. And we see Will, right, with the flashlight, and I go, oh crap, he figured out how to make a mobile version of that big projector thing. So we understand how Will was able to get Judd up there in the tree, which is he didn't get Judd up there in the tree at all. He mind controlled him into hanging himself, which is awful, but great. But another thing that I find very interesting here, before Judd hangs himself, he goes, Will ask him, why do you have a clan robe in your closet? And he goes, oh, because it was my grandfather's, a family heirloom, right? And Will goes to Judd, he goes, why, like if it's a family heirloom, why don't you just display it out in the open? And Judd says nothing. And that's something really interesting. That line to me is something really interesting, because you said it to me, Matt, in one of our private discussions. You said to me, you want to know something really interesting about racist individuals? They try their best to hide the fact that they are racist. So what do you think about that stuff, Matt?
Well, it was interesting that we finally see that it was hypnosis that allowed Will to get Judd to hang himself. And yeah, he tries to deny it. He's like, you got the wrong guy. That's not me. But Will is ahead of the game. He knows more than Judd is anticipating, and he can't talk his way out of this. So I thought that was very interesting. And as Angela is coming to this realization of what actually happened to her close friend and how this played out, but also the why, it's very interesting for us. It makes sense. It explains how this 105-year-old man could do this because he used technology. And then we're kind of wondering, okay, how is Angela going to get out of this memory to hopefully, as much as I enjoy this episode, I don't want to spend multiple episodes in a flashback. I want to get back to Looking Glass, Sister Night. I want to catch up with the story that we've been tracking for 5 previous episodes. So I was interested at this point that we got all the information we needed to move forward. And then I was curious, how are we going to get out of this?
You mentioned how we get out of this. Well, the simple fact is that Lori probably stuffed her stance on doing things by the law, and decided to take Angela to the person who created nostalgia. And lo and surprise, the person that created nostalgia is Lady True. So Angela wakes up in a bed and she's hooked up to this IV, and the camera pans over, and all that we see that happens is Lady True is reading a book there. She closes the book and she goes up to Angela and she says, "Welcome back." And that's it. This episode, I mean, I don't like using this word. This episode is a masterclass in storytelling and story progression, I thought, because it was just wonderfully crafted by Damon and his team. And I just can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, the script by Lindelof and Cord Jefferson and the direction by Stephen Williams, fantastic. Fills in a lot of the mystery gaps that we have had, brings us up to speed, and now we know Lady True has been able to save Angela, and we're going to move forward now that she has this context for everything that happened between her grandfather and Will, and how that may fit into the seventh Cavalry plan to open these portals. We will still have to wait to see.
All right, guys, so that'll do it for this discussion of Watchmen. But if you've seen this episode, in the comments, tell us what you liked about it or tell us what you didn't like about it. But before we go, Matt, if the good folks at home want to talk to you about anything at all, what would be the best place for them to reach you at?
On Twitter at Matt Crandall, or certainly you can check out Armchair Directors on YouTube or Radio 815 Podcast, anywhere you get podcasts.
If you guys want to talk to me about anything at all, the best place to reach me is on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But as I say often, until next time, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.